Yes, I am. You may not believe this, but I turned it on, put it in my pocket, and then when it was time to start, I reached in and turned it off. Things happen like that. Recently, we have had a couple of baptisms. Why did they bother to go through that ritual? And I don't use the term ritual in a bad sense either. You know, something commanded by the Lord. A couple of baptisms recently. Why did the people involved bother to go through that ritual? What was the point? Yes. Okay, which indicates that they believed what about Jesus? He's someone you listen to. And we talk about the someone you listen to, and that's pretty much what the Gospel of John is about. These things are written that ye might believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and believing you might have life through His name. When we talk about Son of God and what all John meant when he said Son of God, all the things that went into this idea of Son of God, John makes it clear. You trace what he had to say about Jesus throughout the book. In the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God. Initial statement, divine being, pre-existent divine being. Equal with God, I am. The one he healed bowed down and worshipped him, and you shall worship the Lord thy God and him only. Only God is an object of worship, and you make yourself out to be God. He didn't deny it. He said pretty much, yep, and that's who he is. So when we talk about Jesus, we're not talking about just another religious teacher. Now, in the Gospel of John, we've reached the point where we see the split in the book. The first 11 chapters is everything up to Jerusalem. And then beginning in chapter 12, it is heavily weighted toward the death and the resurrection of Jesus. So most of the action in the Gospel of John takes place in the final week. He has entered Jerusalem. And he understands that the hour has come. Previous to this, the hour has not yet come. The hour has not yet come. The hour has not yet come. John chapter 12, he enters the city of Jerusalem in the 23rd verse, the hour's come. It's time. And we're going to do a little better job of defining what that hour was all about as we get into the 13th chapter. But Jesus knows that the time has come. There are certain things that are going to happen. He's going to be lifted up. The Father is going to be glorified. The world is going to be judged, and Satan is going to be cast out. In verse 32 of chapter 12, he made the comment, and I, if I am lifted up from the earth, will draw all men to myself. Now that confused some of them. They had heard that the Christ is forever. How can you say the Son of Man is going to be lifted up? They knew lifted up, they knew what crucifixion was all about. How can you say the Son of Man is going to be lifted up? Who is this Son of Man? Suddenly they're very confused, and this led us into a discussion for reasons of unbelief or causes of unbelief. Number one, there is the confusion that they have in their minds when Jesus starts talking about being lifted up, because that does not match their ideas of what the Messiah was all about. And then in verses 37 through 40, we discussed the words of Isaiah last week. They couldn't believe because it was a foregone conclusion. Isaiah had foreseen their unbelief. Now, he did not decree their unbelief, but he did foresee it. And also in Isaiah, the 6th chapter, we see that their situation was kind of like it was in Isaiah's day. In Isaiah's day, when God sent prophets to them, what was their reaction? Duh, we don't get it. Same thing in Jesus' day. It would be the same thing when the Apostle Paul quotes this again in Acts chapter 28. Now, it just has to do with the hardness of the hearts of the people with whom he was speaking. And then finally, verses 42 and 43, the fear tactics. There were some who actually did believe in Jesus, but they were afraid of what? Being cast out of the synagogue. All right, if somebody throws out the question, well, wait a minute, they believed in Jesus, but they wouldn't confess him for fear, how much good is that faith going to do them? Raw belief that you won't act on is what? Faith without works is dead. James had a lot to say about that. Devil's faith. The devils believe and tremble. Wilt thou know, O vain man, that faith without works is dead? James had as much to say as anybody on that particular topic. So when we reach the point somebody says, well, you know, I'm kind of a secret admirer of Jesus, but I don't want anybody to know it because I don't want to bear the consequences of it. That's the kind of thing that's going to do someone absolutely no good. Now, I have a question for you. There is one more cause of unbelief that we're going to put at the bottom of the screen. But before we do that, we'll ask this question. The age we are living in, do people like to be told what to do? Do they like to be told anything? Here's what you should do. Here's what you need to do. Typical response might be what? I'll do what I want to do. I'll make my own decisions. I'm a free moral agent. I don't have to listen to anybody. Does Jesus tell people what to do? Yea or nay? The conclusion of the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapter 7, verses 24 through 27. If you listen to my words, you're like someone who built on what? Built on rock. And the rains are going to come and fall, and the winds are going to blow, but you're going to do what? You're going to stand. If you don't want to listen to my words, you're like somebody who builds on sand. When the storms come, you're done. Steve.
I think this might be splitting hairs, but I see Jesus as he tells people what they have to do in order to achieve something.
Mm-hmm.
What we see today is people just walking around telling people what to do because
Because they're control freaks?
Yeah, it's pretty different, really.
Well, realistically, does the world see Jesus as a control freak? In a lot of ways, yes. If you're talking about rejection of Jesus because of the way many have been raised in our society, when they first come across Jesus and read his words like, oh, he's trying to control me. He's being a control freak. That's not it. He's telling you the truth. Now, in Matthew 7 in the Sermon on the Mount, it came very clear. Jesus did not quibble about the idea, I'm the one you need to listen to. Now, we're going to see that again in John 12, verses 44 through 50. And if we talk about one of the reasons or some of the reasons that people don't believe in Jesus, things that cause unbelief in some people, it just simply has to do with the colossal claim. It's a huge claim. Now let's look at John 12, verses 44 through 50. And first, let's read it in its entirety. Todd, would you read that, please? 44 through 50. Okay. If we sum up this, it is pretty much like Matthew 7, verses 24 through 27. The word of Jesus is either going to make you or it's going to break you. Now, I'm not accusing anybody of anything, but if you are the type of Christian that thinks you can halfway do what the Lord said, you can kind of do what the Lord said, this is something you need to stop and think very, very clearly about. This tremendously weighty as far as implications on our life. Now, does Jesus teach that He is a way to God? When you read this passage of Scripture, it becomes abundantly clear what? He's it. He doesn't say, I'm a way to God. He's saying, I am the way. Now, at this point in history, just put a couple things on the board. Was Hinduism already in the world when Jesus said that? You don't know, do you? Westerners, we don't look around much. Hinduism had been in the world probably 2,000 years at this point. It is the old. Now you've got Hinduism, or at least ancient forms of it. How about Buddhism? Not quite. Some of the thought processes may be, but about 600 BC. That's an approximation. These forms of thoughts had been there forever. Baalism, how long had it been there? Forever and ever and ever. Other forms of worship, forever and ever and ever. We've thrown out Zoroastrianism a couple of times. I don't want to spell the whole thing, so I'll just put Zorro. Zoroastrianism, Mithraism was present at that time, but it hadn't been around very long. You got all these things, and some of these things go way back into antiquity. Sometimes we get to thinking, well, you know, Jesus comes along, then later Hinduism comes along, Buddhism. No. They had been there a long, long time in many cases. And then Jesus comes along. Now we think about what He has to say. Do you think He was cognizant of the idea that these things are already in the world? There are other forms of thinking? He knows. Now, verses 44 and 45. Jesus cried out and said, "He who believes in me does not believe in me, but in Him who sent me. He who sees me sees the one who sent me." Somebody put that in your own words. Is that just double talk? Yes. See me, see God. Believe in me. All right, let's just think about this for a second. Breaking down the claims. This first claim, He's saying belief in me is belief in God. Now, are there people that would say, you know what, I believe in God, I just don't believe in Jesus? Jesus said, nope, that's not the way God's looking at it. If you don't believe in me, don't bother saying you believe in God. And that's pretty simple because God sent Him, yes. Yeah, we're going to see that at the very end of this string of verses. But you start this out, and we are saying that belief in me, belief in God, you are not going to have true belief in God without believing in me. And again, we think about this. Is Hinduism already in the world? Is Buddhism already in the world? Zoroastrianism, Mithraism, they're all there. And Jesus said, nope. To say you believe in God, you're going to have to believe in me. Now, verse 46. emphasizes this. I have come as light into the world so that everyone who believes in me will not remain in darkness. Okay. If these worked, if this really worked, if this really worked, if this really worked, if this really worked, would Jesus have said what he did in verse 46? He says, I've come to be what? Okay, what is light? In the context of the passage, what is light? When Jesus says, I'm the light, what's he talking about? Religious truth. Truth from the Father. When the Spirit has come, he will guide you into all truth. That's what we are interested in. Jesus comes along in that 46th verse and says, I am the light. Well, if I'm the light, that's already here. What's that tell you? That's already here. I'm the light. That's not the light. That's already here. I'm the light. That's not the light. And take it right on down the list. When Jesus speaks, he says, I am the light. He is aware that there are other philosophies, other religions in the world, and he says, no, I'm it. God sent me in the world to be the light. Now, for a moment, unless people become jaded and give up on it, what is the real purpose of theology and philosophy? I mean, what are people looking for? What do they want? Truth? The light? They want somebody to flip the light on for them so they know what way to go, and they've been trying and trying and trying and trying and trying forever and ever and ever. So you get all these things going on. Yeah. They want something that takes them beyond this world, and the different systems almost all address that idea in one form or another. And Jesus comes along and says, wait a minute. If you really want to say you believe in God, you're going to have to believe in me, because God sent me to be the light. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Look at how certain communities have adopted our symbols, our language. The philosophy of today, of the atheists and agnostics, constantly come in and talk about truth and transcendence and being, right?
Yeah.
And it is interesting when you consider what Romans says about how God has put that in our heart.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead. I was just going to say, it's amazing to me how religions rub elbows with each other and trade ideas back and forth. So you'll get somebody talking about truth that if you ask him, well, no, I really don't believe there is such a thing.
Well, right.
And yet the terminology rubbed off somehow.
And I wasn't even comparing religions.
Yeah.
I was looking at the agnostics and
Yeah.
say the LBG XYZ, right?
Yeah.
How they embrace
Yeah.
transcendence with words from the mouth of God.
Truth and righteousness and goodness and equity and things like that, they bleed over into one another because people have been looking for these things forever. And Jesus comes along and says, I'm the light. Now, is that a big claim? Since these things are already in the world, it's me. I'm the one. Let's look at verses 47 and 48. This is the monumental claim. 47, if anyone hears my sayings and does not keep them, I do not judge him. For I did not come to judge the world, but to save the world. He who rejects me and does not receive my sayings has one who judges him. The word I spoke is what will judge him at the last day. Now, this passage we've discussed on numerous occasions. whether or not you remember, but this is the one that is just absolutely colossal. The 47th verse. You don't want to hear my sayings and keep them? I don't judge you. Well, how broad-minded is Jesus? He just told me I don't have to listen to a word he says. Says it right there. You don't want to listen to me? Fine. I don't judge you. I came to save. I didn't come to judge. Fine. Don't listen to me. Is he finished yet? 48th verse comes in. He who rejects me and does not receive my sayings has one who judges him. The word I spoke is what will judge him at the last day. Okay, the word Jesus spoke is being presented as a what? It is a fixed standard. Now, by fixed standard, what do I mean? I mean, he isn't saying, hey, you don't want to listen to me? That's good. No, if you don't want to listen to me, that's fine, but here's what we're going to do. What are we going to do? First, notice there is such a thing as the last day. Oftentimes when we get to talking about last days, we always use the term last days. But John talks about the last day. When we say the last day, what are we talking about? There's going to be a last day. What's going to happen? We're going to wrap this mess up. That's going to be the end of it. We shall stand before the judgment seat of Christ to receive for the things which we have done in the body, whether they are good or whether they are evil. And how is our fate going to be determined in that day? Verse 48. By what will we be judged? You don't want to listen to me, I got no problem. But here's what's going to happen. Come Judgment Day, we're going to take my word and it's going to be like a plumb line. That's the standard of judgment. And what are we going to do with you on that day? We're going to stand you right here next to that word, and we're going to see what we shall see. And that's going to be the basis of judgment. So if you don't want to listen to me, I'm not going to argue with you. I'm not going to fight with you. I'm not going to twist your arm. I'm not going to make you listen, but understand this, the last day is going to come. And here we are. Here's my word, the plumb line. Here you are. We're going to see what we shall see. Now, is that a big claim? Okay. You're not going to be judged by this. You're not going to be judged by that. You're not going to be judged by this. You're not going to be judged by this. You're going to be judged by what I said. And we're going to stand you right there, and that's it. The word of Jesus is presented as a fixed standard of judgment. Now, preach for just a moment. Put yourself next to the line. Do you have some kind of unaddressed issue in your life? What do I mean by unaddressed issue? I got to pick on somebody. Steve, what do you think I mean by unaddressed issue? Sin. Yes, but what? Unaddressed. What do I mean unaddressed? I have not come to grips with. I have not dealt with. I'm trying to pretend like it's no big deal. I know it needs to be dealt with, but somehow I just don't feel like it. But you're speaking like a man with an honest and good heart that's trying. Is that always the case? Or do sometimes we blind ourselves, like the Apostle Paul said, I know I've got this issue here, but I'm going to put it off and not deal with it, pretend it's not there. What am I going to find out the judgment day? Can I escape the plumb line? There's not a way in the world you're going to escape that plumb line. Jesus really wants to save. He came to save, but in the day of judgment, he says, hey, here's the way it is. Here's my word. You're going to answer to it. And there's not a thing in the world can change that. Why should he have that kind of authority? Pardon me? I heard a couple things shouted out. I heard one up here said, why shouldn't he? You knew I didn't have an answer for that, huh? Yeah. Another one back here. Yes? He's our creator. He makes the rules. We're not done. Okay, here we go. His word is the standard of judgment because his word came from the Father. 49 and 50, for I did not speak on my own initiative, for the Father himself who sent me has given me a commandment as to what to say and what to speak. I know that his commandment is eternal life, therefore the things I speak just as the Father has told me. The source of his teaching is what? Where'd he get it? Did he just invent it himself, or was he in collusion with the Father in heaven? Collusion's a negative sounding term. What's a better word than collusion? Harmony. All right. Yes.
I'd like to read John 8 states it in verse 16 says that, but if I do judge, my decisions are right because I am not alone. I stand with the Father.
Yeah, like that. One thing about deity, we talk about qualities of deity. One I think we often overlook. To me, one of the most amazing traits of deity is the ability to be perfectly on the same page. How many men do you know can be perfectly on the same page? We get 8 elders at one table. How often are we perfectly on the same page? Almost never happens. Deity can be perfectly on the same page. Jesus' word from the Father. Okay, the plumb line from the Father. This is the claim. Jesus comes into the world not at a time where there was no religion. There was all kinds of religion, and the religious world was crumbling. We talk about Jesus came in the fullness of time. A lot of the pagan religions were just, people were walking away from them, things were falling apart. He comes on the scene and says, I'm the one. I'm the one that the Scriptures have been pointing at. I'm the one that can really deliver to you the Word of the Father. Now, our tendency, it was the tendency back then, and it's the tendency today to look at all of it and say, well, it's all good. Why is it all good? If somebody wants to say it's all good, what kind of thought processes is he going through? A couple of ideas. Either somehow all from God. God sent these guys, then these guys, then these guys, then these guys. It's either all from God, and that is a very popular idea at the present time. How do we explain the presence of all these different religions? Different avatars sent at different times. They all came from God. So even though it's hard to see how they could all fit together, trust us, they do. Well, trust us, they don't. Either that or, more logical explanation to me would be the belief in many gods. I think polytheism makes more sense than some of the things that people float today about all that coming from God. Imagine the divine creator who created heaven and earth turning the light on men by saying 19 different things. That does not make sense. I would rather be a polytheist than look at it like some do today. Yes.
We might be able to add one more in our modern day thinking, and that's the cheap grace and the easy believism.
Yeah.
To what you were saying earlier about how religions rub elbows with. And you get to this philosophy apart from theology, right?
Mm-hmm.
That God's message is universal, and His mercy and His grace extends to all people who acknowledge Him and fear Him.
Yeah.
So the religions that you could actually add to that modern day
Yeah.
is Judaism, because that's a man-made religion now.
Universalism, you could put that in there.
Worship according.
Yeah.
So they bring in the Torah and the commentaries and all of the teachers, and they cobble together a religion, just like Islam, another man-made religion that's cobbled together through their commentaries that people feel justified that God has told them this and therefore they're right. And I think it gets right back to your earlier point about that plumb line, because each person is going to be judged for every careless word they say, every deed they do. They themselves, right, condemn themselves by not listening to the Son.
Yeah. We stop and we think about this. A group of people with our mouths say we believe Jesus Christ is the Son of God. Jesus is Lord. If you say with your mouth Jesus is Lord, do you have any real excuse for ignoring His Word? Or the plumb line? You've acknowledged this is the single most important person that ever came into this world, sent from God. Now, did Jesus expect everybody to listen to Him? He knew they should, but did He not say that broad is the gate, wide is the gate, broad is the way that leadeth to damnation, and many there be that find it? He understood how it would play out. He came to call His people. He came to call God's remnant out of this world. And the claim He makes, in that last day, that's the way judgment. I'm the one, my word, that's what you're going to be judged by, not anything else. Comments? One more time. Yeah, Lord, Lord, and do not. You know, it's kind of funny, that statement, Lord, Lord, have we not done many things? Why call you me Lord, Lord, and do not the things which I say? Usually we have taken that patch of, those are denominational people. Really? You stop and you think. Sometimes the people of God, do they say, Lord, Lord, and do not the things that He says? All right. That's the one we're dealing with. Whether you look at it from Matthew 7 or that passage, He's the one. Yes.
I think, going back to where you said, all from God, I think there's a large number of people out there that think nothing is from God.
Yeah.
And yet they like the concept of these different religions. It brings about, some civility and stuff like that. But people, they don't like to think very deeply about it. And they make it just it's very relative to them and what they like and what they feel. And I think it bears itself sometimes when everyone's probably heard the accusation against a Christian. You only use Christianity as a crutch to help you
I got to admit, somebody said, you use it as a crutch. Yes, I do. And it's a great crutch. And I couldn't make it through this world without a crutch.
Yeah, but they mean it in a very different way.
They mean it in a different way than I mean it. But, yes, I do. We have all seen this, I'm sure. Are there people in the world, intelligent people, that don't believe in God, but they're glad there's religion in the world? Because in their hearts they know that if everybody thought like I do, what kind of world would we be in? All of a sudden it's dog eat dog. And yes.
I think there is a sense, too, of, I think Jesus even questioned the apostles. Do you believe all the way? Like the apostles, I think there were times in their lives when they believed certain things, but then Jesus would teach something beyond what they knew, and he's watching them. Okay, you gotta come the rest of the way with what I'm teaching you.
Yep. Taking them the next step, question whether they were ready for it. That happens. All right, look down to chapter 13 and verse 1. Tremendous claim. If we back this up, just to review for a second, here we are. Causes of unbelief. Why is it that sometimes people don't come to faith in Jesus? Confusion. They look at the scriptures and I'm kind of confused on what that means there. Isaiah's prophecy is foregone conclusion. Some weren't going to believe. Fear tactics. Society has fear tactics and the claims of Jesus. They're big. They're huge claims. Now, because the world doesn't want to believe, oftentimes it makes up some grand stories. And everybody in the world is good and honest and fair-minded. So if I believe something and this guy doesn't, I'm above making up stories about that guy to make him look bad. Is that always true? Do politicians make up stories? Do criminals make up stories? Faithless husbands make up stories. I started with that list. Okay. All right, let's think about this for a second. Chapter 13 and verse 1. Now before the feast of the Passover, Jesus, knowing that his hour had come, and that he would depart out of this world to the Father, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. All right, Jesus knows that the hour has come. And so now we get to define what the hour is. Knowing that his hour had come, that he would depart out of the world to the Father. Right, that's the hour. The hour's come. It's the hour in which he will depart out of the world. That means that hour is going to last about 50 days to Pentecost. So when we say the hour, we know it just means the time. His time had come. We think of all the things that would be included within that hour. His death, his resurrection, his appearing to the disciples, ascending back to heaven. This is the hour. This was the focal point of everything God had done in the world up to this point. Now, one thing that I want to notice that he stressed, having loved his own. Who is his own in this passage? Who's he gathered together with? He's gathered together with the 12, for the Passover. Now, if somebody wants to say his own means all Christians, fine, I have no real problem with that. But in this context, he's gathered together with the 12. He's going to be speaking for a long time, praying for a long time concerning these 12. He loved them to the end. Now, he knew them, he loved them to the very end. Why do you think John's going to stress that? telling the story of Jesus. Why stress that he knew them, he loved them, clear to the end? Now, you don't know the direction I'm going, so I'll let it out of the bag here. Does the world invent weird stories about Jesus? All right, some of the weird stories. After Jesus is raised from the dead, and you can find this to this day in Jewish literature, old Jewish literature, they invented the story that Jesus' father was a Roman soldier. And I believe it was Ben et Pantera. Today, Da Vinci Code. Strange ideas concerning what was done with the story of Jesus and how it was embellished. Y'all heard of the Gospel of Judas? Never heard of the Gospel of Judas? Every once in a while they'll pull that thing out and act like it's some big deal nobody knew anything about, but they've known about that for the last 2,000 years since it was first written. And they pull it out like some big discovery. There was all kinds of literature written anti-Jesus. Stories made up at the time. That's what you do with something you hate. You make up stories about it. All kinds of scenarios to explain Jesus away or twist the story about him. And I have no doubt you could probably find stories about Jesus that claimed that he was dragged kicking and screaming to his crucifixion. Was he dragged kicking and screaming to his crucifixion? If I am dragged away kicking and screaming to my crucifixion, what does that indicate about me? I don't want to be crucified. I hadn't planned on being crucified, and I'm looking for a way out. So it's in somebody's vested interest, if they are enemies of the cross, to make up stories. Well, what we are looking at here is about frame of mind. The frame of mind of Jesus as he is departing from this world. Is he all wrapped up in himself? Nope. He loves his own to the very end. Is he unable to function? Is he short-tempered or out of control? Is he looking ahead to what the disciples are going to need? Yeah. To me, one of the most amazing things, the soldiers come for Jesus and he says, "Who are you looking for? Let these go." When we think of this hour and the way Jesus is behaving himself, the expressions, courage under fire, grace under fire, composure, keeping your composure. The hour is the greatest example of composure that you will ever see. Now we got a choice to make. You know, as we go forward looking at this, try to get this in. Here's the choice. When you read the story of Jesus, particularly the crucifixion, the hour, 2 Peter 1:16, Peter says, "We have not followed cunningly devised fables when we made known unto you the coming of the Lord." All right, for Peter to say we haven't followed cunningly devised fables means what? Somebody had done what? Charged them with cunningly devised fables. You guys got together and made this story up, which is commonly said today. John said, nope, Jesus knew that his hour had come. He had foreseen it. He knew he was going. He wasn't dragged kicking and screaming. He knew that he was going, and he loved his disciples to the very end. He wasn't thinking so much about himself as he was about them. Total picture of control. So, you know, this is essentially what you believe about Jesus. Either somebody got together and made up a really clever story and sold it to humanity, or you believe that Jesus was the one calling the shots during this last hour. And that's where we will pick up next week with the washing of the feet. Thank you. Got that.